Hello, a pleasant good day, good morning to all the students of immunology, and welcome to the final session in terms of for this semester. This semester, this recording, this would be a review of the semester's work as it relates to immunology, particularly centering or putting our focus on the final exam itself. This final assessment will be, of course, on Wednesday, the 16th of June, and the time frame is from 6 a.m. to 12 noon. So during that time frame, you will be allowed to take the assessment itself. The assessment consists of 5 parts. Part one is 30 multiple choice questions, and this will account for 30 This will account for 30% of your grade. Part two, there are 4 matching questions. This will account for 30% of your grade as well. True false, you'll have 10 true false questions, that'll be 10%. There's a structured essay, one structured essay, and that is 20%. And then finally, there's a labeling question, which will account for 10% of your final grade. All right, so let's see if we could get into a little more in depth into those sections. Now, mark you, those sections are independent of one another. So therefore, you will be able to do section one and then take a pause, section two, take a pause, section three, take a pause, and so on. Each time you take a pause, you have to, of course, to finish the section, and then you could take a pause and then continue. What must be noted is that all of the sections must be completed within that 6 hour time frame between 6 a.m. to 12 noon. But you could take a pause. Once you finish a section, you could take a pause before continuing. All right, so that is important. For the multiple choice, now this exam in totality, it's a comprehensive exam. So therefore, it will cover all the material which we have previously examined, which we have previously looked at for the semester itself. In terms of for the multiple choice question, a very good idea in terms of for the review would be to have a look at those multiple choice questions which come at the end of the chapter from the book itself, and also those which were given during class time. That will form a good way of revision. All right. So do have a look at those. That's a nice way to get the rhythm in terms of expectations for the assessment itself. All right. So that's the best way I would suggest when you are reviewing the material for the multiple choice. Have a look at the questions at the end of the chapter in the Kobe text, and also have a look at those questions which were given during the semester um, for you to do. The second section is matching questions, section number two, or part two as it would appear on your assessment. And with that one, you'd have some drop down menus, and you just have to, you'd have a phrase, and then you have to choose which one corresponds to it. All right. So for that one, while focusing on everything is important, I would strongly suggest that you do pay attention to some of the autoimmune diseases, which we do, which we, some of the autoimmune diseases and some of the causes of those autoimmune diseases. So things such as MS, type 1 diabetes, myasthenia gravis, as it relates to autoimmune disease, as we did in the chapter, do have a look at them and see the correlation between the disease itself and the causative agent. All right. So very important there in terms of your revision. That's one thing which would be helpful. And in terms of not only piggybacking on that, also look at the different treatment responses associated with the autoimmune disease. All right? So one example, for instance, if you're looking at DeGeorge syndrome, what type of response, immune response treatment is given for that. Chronic granulomatous granulomatous disease, CGD, as is often said, X-linked gamma globulinemia. These are things, have a look at them. Common variable immunodeficiency. So for those immunodeficiency diseases, do pay attention to the treatment response. And of course, this would correlate to the chapter on immunodeficiency diseases. All right. And relating to it, you should be able to differentiate between adaptive immunity and innate immunity. This was done earlier in the course. So pay attention to how you compare and you contrast them in terms of one to the other. All right. So do pay attention to the characteristics associated, specifically those associated with adaptive, those associated with innate. All right. So you should be able, if given certain things in terms of, for example, what could be mediated by antibodies, what adapts during the response, what is the target of vaccination, you should be able to say which one is adaptive and which one is innate in a case like that. All right. So that is important in terms of should form part of your revision. And again, look at the specific chapter related to immunodeficiency diseases, and also do pay attention to the questions that come at the end of the chapter as well. All right. Then, of course, well, you have a short section on true false questioning. True false question. With the true false question, one of the things I would say is, of course, we're in a time of COVID, and there are many different types of vaccines out there. Right? We know the Sinopharm vaccine, we have the Maneuver, we have the G&G vaccine that is out there. We have the AstraZeneca vaccines, we have different types. Do pay attention to those different vaccines and the characteristics or the salient things associated with the different vaccines. That was an exercise which we did. We had, in fact, is in one of the last chapters. We did that within the last 2 weeks in terms of the vaccines and the specific things associated with it. So you should be able then, ideally, to differentiate the different types of vaccines, and not only differentiate the different types of vaccine, but the things associated specifically with each vaccine in terms of their modality of action and how they work. All right. So do pay attention to that one. All right. Then we come on to the structured essay type. So what would the structured essay type look like? Well, that would be, you'll be given a little small scenario, and then you'll be asked to then type in your response as it relates to that scenario. All right. So that is something you'll be given in terms of a scenario, just one scenario, and then you'll be asked certain questions related to that particular scenario. All right. So do pay attention in terms of some of the autoimmune diseases that we looked at, some which are covered. And if there are any particular ones which were highlighted for homework, you should pay attention to that one, to those, right? Any ones which have been highlighted as it relates to those, okay? And then, so that's a structured essay. It's short, so you'll be typing in short answers related to those questions. The question itself would have about 6 or 7 sections to it, and then you'll be typing your response to it. And then the final section will be, of course, the labeling question. And with that one, you'll be looking at a certain cycle, and then you'd have to move the labels and put them into the cycle itself to complete that particular cycle. All right. So do pay attention. Within the last couple of weeks, we looked at some 1 or 2 specific cycles. So you should pay attention to that and look to see how you could fill in those cycles. And that would be about it in a nutshell as it relates to your revision for the final assessment. So once again, in terms of the structure of the exam itself, the exam going from 6 a.m. to 12 noon, 5 parts. And do remember the day, Wednesday, the 16th of June, from 6 a.m. to 12 noon. That's the block of time allocated for it. You have 5 sections, and each of those sections, right, the multiple choice section, as was mentioned before, the multiple choice section, you have 30 multiple choice questions. And in terms of the time associated with the multiple choice, you'd have more than an adequate amount of time to actually complete the multiple choice. Section 2, you have a matching section. You have 4 questions, and again, those would cater for immunological diseases. For the multiple choice, we'll be looking at 35 minutes, 30 questions, 35 minutes to complete those questions. All right. For the matching questions, you have 4 matching questions, 35 minutes. And again, uh, I already gave certain key areas where you should focus on as relating to that. For the true false, uh, pay attention, I would say, to vaccines in particular, and also have a look at HIV, right, in terms of the modality of action of HIV. So those should be, not with science fact questions could come from other areas, but do pay attention to the um, uh, the vaccines, as related to COVID-19. All right, and we have the structured essay. As I said, that will cover, in terms of the structured essay, you'd have a case scenario, and then you'll be asked questions based on that case scenario. All right. So um, after you've finished that and you've taken your little pause, then you'd have the final one, which is labeling, and that would be based on a cycle. So do pay attention to your cycles where that is concerned. All right. So notwithstanding those key areas which I have highlighted, there are other anything for which we have done work during the semester that's fair game, and it could come on the assessment itself. I just highlighted some areas which I do believe you should pay a little further, a little more attention whilst doing your revision in terms of focusing on, but everything else is fair game. Do remember with the multiple choice questions, you should have a look at those which were done during the semester itself and do revise them. That should hold you in good stead where that section is concerned. All right. Okay. Well, that's it in terms of the immunological revision. So once you follow those pathways, and of course, looking at that which was done during the semester, that should hold you in good stead. All right. So all the best. Do remember the day and time. I will be available, of course, during the week. Should you require any assistance, hit me up on WhatsApp, and I would be able to respond accordingly. Do remember that. And all the best in your revision. Okay? Take care. Have a good one. Bye bye.